just wanna be successful. I just wanna be successful. I just wanna be successful.
Hello class, this video discusses measuring inflation. As you see, the main measure of inflation in the US is something called the Consumer Price Index. In other words, you can't understand how to measure inflation if you don't understand the CPI. So let's first discuss the CPI. Well, it includes some 300 products. Now you're probably saying, which products? Well, it's products that are typically used by the average consumer. We're going to go into the BLS website, which discusses more about the CPI in a second. Let me first just read this basic definition here. The CPI is an index that compares the price of a market basket of goods and services in one period with the price of the same or highly similar market basket in a base period, currently 1982 to 1984. Now, what does all that mean? Well, imagine having 300 products, and these products could vary from bread to cars to computers to doctor's visits, right? Services as well. So you have 300 products and services. Imagine taking the prices of all of these products and services and putting them literally in a basket. Imagine that for a second. And out of the bottom of the basket comes one price, which is the average price of these 300 goods and services. That's essentially what the CPI is trying to do. It's trying to take the average price of 300 products, or I should say 300 goods and services, and determine the average price of them. Now, you're probably thinking, well, is it just the mean? Do you add up all the prices and then divide by 300? It's not that simple. So the price of the market basket, 1982 to 84, those goods and services, 300 of them, whatever price they were, we found the average price in 1982 to 1984, those 3 years. We took the average price for those 3 years, and we're calling that our denominator right here. Okay, so that would be technically considered the denominator. Let me just highlight that. Okay, so you have the price of those, the average price of those 300 goods and services in the years 82 to 84. That is our denominator. Now, you take the same set of goods and services, the same 300 goods and services, and you find the average price in another year. Say it was 1992 or 2003 or 2012. You use that as your numerator. That's what we mean by the price of the most recent market basket in the particular year. So the numerator could be whatever year you're in, say 2012, but the denominator always stays the same. That way, as the numerator changes, you have a constant base year price as your denominator. Okay? Let's take a further look or examination of what CPI is. Okay, this is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It is the organization, the government organization, which measures and calculates the CPI. I'm not going to get into the specifics of how they do that. I've already told you to imagine the market basket and the average price coming out the bottom. That's essentially all you need to know. But if you are interested, it's a very good website, and they will have on their website frequently asked questions. So I urge you to look at this when you have a moment. Look at what is the CPI. You get a more detailed explanation. How is it used, essentially, to measure price changes in the country? Is it a cost of living index? Does it measure my experience with price changes? How is the market basket determined? That's really the only one I want to look at for this video. But again, I urge you to look at these when you have a moment. Let's click on this one. The CPI market basket is developed from detailed expenditure information provided by families and individuals. You may have wondered, when I said before, imagine 300 goods and services, well, how do they know the prices of these goods and services, and how do they come up with this number, right? And ultimately, who is paying for these goods and services? Well, the answer to all of that is the families and individuals who bought them. So the CPI will send out surveys of families and individuals and ask about their spending patterns. They want to know essentially, what did you buy? They want to know, what items you've purchased frequently, personal and food products. So these individuals who, as you see, keep diaries listing everything they bought during a 2-week period, then they'll give this information back to the BLS organization, and BLS will essentially create the market basket of 300 goods and services, which changes every couple of years. So the market basket that existed back in 1982 is different from the market basket that we have today. But the way you calculate CPI is the same as it was back in 1982. That's a big point there. Let's take a look at the next statement here. What goods and services does the CPI cover? Well, take a look. The CPI represents all goods and services purchased for consumption by the population. When we say population, we mean either U or W. The CPI measure you hear commonly talked about in the press is CPI-U, which is urban. CPI-U, the U stands for urban, which represents almost 90% of all Americans. So that's the most common one. What's in this market basket, you ask? Virtually everything. There's food and beverage. There's housing prices. There's clothing or apparel prices, transportation, medical care, recreation, education and communication, and everything else in between. So it covers many of the goods that the average consumer in America consumes, and those goods, which total about 300, the prices of them are taken and an average price is found, and that's called, again, the price of the market basket. Now this is how you ultimately calculate the CPI. Let's take a look at this first line here. CPI is calculated on a monthly basis. So in December of 2011, the CPI was calculated as 225,672. That was the CPI. So when we look at the slide here, we can say that whatever the price was in the market basket in 1982 to 84, that stayed the same. But when the numerator was calculated, the final number came out to be 225,672 and 226,665. Let's see how they arrived at these two data points. Okay, so let's first look at December 2011, which is right here. This is our first calculation. Again, our market basket price in 1982 to 1984 will not change. That will stay consistent. Let's say it was 50. 50 may not have been the actual number, but it doesn't necessarily matter as long as we keep it the same. Let's call it 50. Let's say that the market basket price in December 2011 was 112.836. Well, if you do that math, you'll come up with 225.672. And of course, because I had the answer in the first place, I was able just to come up with the numerator. But the point is, this is how they construct the CPI. They have a market basket price, let's say it's 50, and then they'll find the price of the market basket in some other period. December 2011, for instance. Well, if the market basket price was 50, then in 1982 to 84, then the market basket price in December 2011 must have been 112,836 in order for the actual CPI to be 225,672, keeping in mind that that is what it actually was. Let's take a look at January 2012, where the actual CPI was 226.665. So again, keeping the market basket the same $50. And if you know the CPI is this number, then you could easily mathematically show that the market basket price in January 2011 or 2012 was 113.332. So even though my numerator and denominator numbers aren't actual numbers, it still shows you how the CPI is calculated. Bottom line, you keep the market basket the same for both equations, and then you take as your numerator whatever you calculate as the market basket price in the particular month or the particular year. When you have these two numbers, 225 and 226, all you do is use the rate of growth formula to find the percent change. When you find that percent change, that's called the inflation rate. So if you take January 2012's number, which is 226,665, minus December 2011's CPI number, which is 225,672, and divide it by, of course, 225,672 times 100, you will get a rate of growth of 0.4%. That 0.4% is known as the inflation rate. It's the amount by which prices have gone up between two periods, in particular, December 2011, January 2012. And so, do we see 0.4 in the official BLS data? Of course we will, because I used their two CPI data points. So there is 0.4. Okay? That is how they calculate the CPI. Let's go back to the slides. On the next slide, you see that the inflation is known as an increase in the general level of prices. The general formula is CPI in 1 year minus CPI in another year over that original year times 100. That's what we just did. Only difference between what I just did and this formula is that I was using months. But it's the same concept. It's a rate of growth between two periods. And that, folks, essentially is how you understand CPI, as well as how you understand how to use CPI to calculate inflation. Practice, practice, practice. Talk to you soon.